I'm going to kick off this section of Healthy and Whole with a story from my journey that will illustrate the theory that I will come on to teach you. Now, I am sharing perhaps the most dramatic experience I've had with myself to date, and I'm not expecting that you necessarily need to have or will have experiences as dramatic as this. Your journey is your journey. But what I'm hoping you will get is both the courage and conviction to explore your own inner world, and also a few frameworks from my story that can help perhaps guide you further on your journey. And I make no apology for telling you about my own negative emotions, dark days, and also for hoping that it will bring up some of the same content for you. And it is only, as I said way back at the start, it's only really in noticing the lights on the dashboard that tell us that something's wrong, that we can have a hope of solving and resolving our inner world. And so if you find yourself triggered by any of the content in this particular section, always feel free to stop, get some space, get what you need. Be really good at creating a greenhouse around yourself to provide what you need. Get safe. But if you can be brave, if you can engage with whatever is surfacing for you, then I invite you to have a box of tissues handy and maybe a friend on the end of the phone. Because as we delve deeper into the shadow parts of ourselves and into those parts that our brain would normally want to push away, ignore, edit, or delete entirely, it gives us the opportunity to own our story. And in owning our story, we can write a brave new ending. So here's my story. This is a story about my marriage to the very wonderful Nick Light. We've been married for now coming up to 15 years. And the first 10 years of our marriage was characterized by a lot of struggle and periods of great happiness, followed by periods of great conflict. And we had tried everything at this point when the story starts. We'd tried everything. We had done therapy, we'd done marriage courses, we'd had mediation, we'd read books, we'd tried everything we could think of to sort our communication, to help us with a better sex life, to sort out our conflicts, to help us more meaningfully engage and regular date nights or whatever it was. And nothing had really got to the bottom of the problem. And it was wearing us both down. And we were in a very precarious situation in our lives. This is about 3 or 4 years ago now. And one Tuesday afternoon, I was minding my own business when I came face to face with my shadow self and with all of the stuff I had so carefully tried to manage, to contain, to ignore probably, and to power through. And I had this one thought that Tuesday afternoon. The thought was this: I can't cope with my marriage anymore. And it was an honest thought that I had been trying to deny for some time. And with that thought came a wave of grief that had been stored up for a long period of time at this point and literally pushed me to the ground, where I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And that day was the start of a period of probably mild depression, but certainly grief and remorse over what I could see was the end of my ability to cope with what we were going through. And of course, it was the start of my ability to rethink the problem, but it came with the loss of my dreams. It came with the loss of my sense of identity that the security of our connection had given us, had given me. It came with the loss of the imagined future and a lot of a loss of the way I related to the world and to other people. And it was really hard for me to face that. It was very painful, it was very disconcerting, it was very hard for Nick, who didn't really understand what I was going through. He was to come and have his own moments of reckoning where he felt he couldn't go on with our marriage anymore. And because we both reached that point at similar times, we were then able to go and find a counsellor, a marriage therapist, sit in her office and allow her to help us to piece together what had happened and piece together our desire to carry on. Of course, I didn't know this at the time. I thought our marriage was over and we were going to have to break our family apart and split up. And this really was so hard to face. And you know, the real difficult thing for me, and this may be true of you too, was the loss of control. I had spent so much of my life trying to control my circumstances for my own health, but also for the health of my kids and of Nick as well. And realizing I had no control actually over him and very little control over myself. My limits were pressing in on me and I knew I just couldn't take any more. I had to survive. And if that meant leaving the marriage, then that is what I would need to do. And that loss of control really reduced me to, I guess, a very small child. And coming face to face with my own vulnerability on that Tuesday afternoon on the floor as I was sobbing also gave me a way to connect beautifully with my own fragility. And the one thing that I knew for certain amongst everything else I didn't know for sure anymore was that I was loved and I would accept myself. It was incredibly, at the same time, a place of great pain. It was a place of no shame. And I knew that even if Nick didn't accept me, even if my friends and family didn't come to terms with what I was going through, that I would not reject myself. And it was through the practice of, by this point, years and years of personal work, of all the tools we've talked about, naming and noticing, being the reporter, loving myself, talking to my child self, we're going to do that very soon, and repeating mantras and meditations around my worth, my value, my lovedness, my connection with others. It was all of that in that moment that rose up to comfort me in my emotional pain and my psychological torment. And slowly, 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 over the months, I was able to piece together a new sense of identity, not based on my ability to cope, but based on my own self-love and the value I had in my own eyes. And to obviously then resolve or continue to resolve, because we're still working on our marriage, of course, everyone is, but continue to resolve the difficulties we had in our relationship and be honest with the fact that it was going to take work to repair and nothing was certain, but that we loved each other and wanted this to work. And I tell you that story 3 years on as both the best and the worst moment of my life. The moment when I came face to face with myself in a way I had not been able to before. In a way where, whilst my ego was running the show, as it normally is, and I was trying to cope and trying to save face and trying to hold it together, I couldn't discover the really raw and vulnerable parts of my personality that were hidden from my view and came starkly face to face with me that day. And it's, I guess, that connection with that part of myself that has really formed the bedrock of my new sense of identity and brings with it so much more freedom. Because I know really deep down that I don't need to be okay to still be loved. I don't need to cope to still accept myself. That I can mess up, get it wrong, fail big time. There can be difficulty and there can be pain, and I will still be okay. It was like an enlarging of my heart or my spirit as I embraced myself with my shadow side, with my limitations, not in spite of them, but including them. and embraced myself in a bigger hug than I've been able to before. So I tell you that story because I hope you're going to be able to see, as we talk about the theory of the shadow self and the theory of integration, how that's worked in practice for me, why I'm so passionate about it, why I believe there's really only can be true growth when there's true honesty with self, and that the path to encountering ourselves often does involve pain and difficulty, setback and frustration and grief and loss. But it is the only true spiritual path, and I believe the only true path to being healthy and whole. So let's come on to look at the shadow.